Welcome to No Boxes, Just Verses, the podcast where we go beyond the bios, beyond the titles, and we explore the lessons that have shaped today's most inspiring leaders, all through the songs that have moved them. Each week, we build a playlist of a leader's life. 5 songs, 5 lessons, one unforgettable leadership playlist.
No boxes, just verses. We're not playing around. No boxes, just verses. Listen to the sound. No boxes, just verses. Our stories out loud. No boxes, just verses. Watch wisdom astound. The stories of how we found our way. Stories of how we learned to pray. Our stories out loud. Our wisdom, our pearls. Everyone say wow, 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 wow. Woo-hoo. No boxes, just verses. Feel it move.
And today, I'm so honored to welcome Daryl Butler, also known as DB, to the No Boxes, Just Verses show. DB, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Shannon. I'm really excited about this.
Oh, I am so excited because all the things that you're working on that sit at the intersection of culture and technology and faith and influence are really a big part of what No Boxes, Just Verses is all about and why I started the podcast. So I was so excited that we got connected. Shout out to Susan. But also we know so many people in common. You know, I at one point worked at an alphabet company. And so it was just natural for us to get you on the podcast. So I'm super excited to share your journey with our listeners. And I'm going to get into first your bio before we get into your lesson. DB is the Vice President of Global Partnerships and Trusted Voices at Google. He is responsible for forging strategic alliances and partnerships across Google's portfolio of companies, including cloud, platform, and devices, search, Gemini, and YouTube. Your team is focused on embedding the Google brand and culture with purpose, developing meaningful integrations that create unique experiences for consumers and expand the company's reach. In collaborations with Google's brand and intelligence marketing teams, you all build contextual content and campaigns that bring these partnerships to life. Under DB's leadership, the team manages complex, multi-product partnerships with some of the world's most influential brands and talent. I mean, it's Google. So, of course, it's things like in places like McLaren Racing, the Olympics, the National Basketball Association, the WNBA, Alex Cooper, and Steph Curry's SC30 Inc. Just to name a few, by the way. DB earned a dual Bachelor of Arts in Marketing and Finance from the Morehouse College and an MBA from Pepperdine. 2 totally different experiences. I can't wait to get into this because as a total aside, I lived really close to Pepperdine. And I remember saying to my husband at the time, I could never send a kid to Pepperdine because they would probably fail out because that is a gorgeous campus. Like, I don't even know how you study, but that's a whole nother conversation. Look, DB, you remain very committed, and I know this personally, to service and giving back to your community through your church, local YMCA, your college alumni association. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that you are a proud member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated.
Roo-roo.
DB, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Shannon. I couldn't write a better bio.
I mean, it was fun reading it. In fact, I was like, I want to do it again. But let's get into your background. We start life as Daryl Butler before everybody gives you the nickname DB. Where does a DB grow up? What are you dreaming of? What are your passions? The song you pick is so beautiful. And it took me back to a time, I grew up in DC. It took me back to a time listening to WHUR radio, Howard University's radio, where this song played on repeat. It's Keep Your Head to the Sky by Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Yeah. Well, for me, music was a centerpiece in the household as a young child. I can remember Sundays was no TV, and it was literally vinyl all day throughout the day. And, my parents went to Al Green and Stevie Wonder, Four Tops, and the Temptations, all that kind of stuff. But when we would play Earth, Wind, and Fire, it just was something that I was even gravitated to. And it still is one of my hallmark songs to this day because it does take me back to Sundays after breakfast, after church, reading, sitting, being part of a family, and having that music in the background. It literally lives in the background of my life today.
And where are you growing up at this time?
Los Angeles. So originally from Los Angeles, well, originally born in Denver, Colorado. My dad played a year with the Broncos. After that didn't pan out, we packed up and moved from Denver to Los Angeles. And so my formidable years, from as much as I can remember all the way until I left for college, was Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles back then was we had the East I grew up on the East Coast, but it really was truly East Coast, West Coast. Music was regional. So you
Yeah.
grew up with a whole bunch of different music that I don't even know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's funny because, I started to understand the regional nature of music a little later in life. Of course, I grew up with NWA and gangster rap and those types of things. But you have your transcendent artists like Earth, Wind, and Fire and the like. But yeah, it wasn't until when I got to college, quite frankly, when I started to really appreciate that music has a few different personalities. And I got a chance to experience those personalities. And I continue to appreciate those personalities to this day.
Another thing I want to make sure we mention here, I interview a lot of people from Detroit, and I've interviewed a couple people from LA, and there's certain cities where people actually ask each other routinely, where'd you go to high school? I don't know what it is about those cities. Nobody in the DC area, I feel like I've never really been asked where I went to high school, but something about LA people, they tend to want to know that. So I'm
Yeah.
going to be remiss because I'll get comments that I didn't ask. Where'd you go to high school?
So it's funny because that's true. As cool as our community was, a lot of us did go to different schools, but we were still part of a community. So I went to Palisades High School. I had a lot of friends that went to Westchester or University High School, or Beverly Hills High School, but we all were from the same general neighborhoods. So even though we went to different high schools, we played against each other in sports, but we always hung out together because we were still part of an interesting community. So yeah, you're right. I still have friends to this day who I didn't go to high school with, but it is always a topic that comes up because that creates a little bit of an interesting degrees of separation story when you're meeting people or interacting with folks, well beyond the time that we were in school.
My stereotype of how LA people grew up, because again, everything was so regional back then. If somebody told me they were from LA, I was like, oh, they just spend all their days at the beach and they're so physically fit and they're just living the good life. Was that accurate?
No, I wouldn't call it accurate. I think it's an aspect, but those of us well, I'd be lying if I didn't tell you I skipped classes from Palisades and went right down to Mescal Canyon, and I was right at the beach. So yes, there's some truth to that. But there was always Fox Hills Mall. There was always, Inglewood Park, Centinela Park. There was always some other places where we found ourselves hanging out and enjoying life. There was a Fat Burger right there on La Cienega, which was, our go-to spot as young people. That's where we started our hang for the weekend. And that determined where we ended up going and hanging out as crews. So there's a little bit of truth to that, but there's a lot more to it than just Venice Beach and Santa Monica Pier.
Like it's not TV, although that's the impression that we all had. Is like,
Yeah.
You guys grew up in a Baywatch lifestyle or something.
Like I said, that's a portion of it, but not the whole story.
Your next phase is you go to college. The song that you pick is Fight the Power by Public Enemy. Now, we've already established you grew up on the West Coast. How do you pick to go to Morehouse, which is a historically Black college and university, HBCU? How does a California boy pick to go to Atlanta? What was motivating you there? And I think the song you pick is probably fairly appropriate because I also have lived in Atlanta. When you go from an environment like where you were living in LA to an Atlanta, it's different. It's a different community, but it is definitely one of those cities that has a really thriving Black, educated, middle class and upper middle class base. So
Mhm.
how do you pick that?
Well, I can't say that I appreciated all of those things, Shannon, when I made the decision. But if I look back, I'm fortunate to have a legacy of HBCU graduates in my family. I'm third generation HBCU graduate. Parents went to Dillard, grandparents went to Southern and Prairie View. I have uncles and aunts that also went to Dillard and Southern and Grambling. So it was not necessarily a new idea. My sister went to Howard. My kids went to Howard. And then the list goes on. So the idea of going to an HBCU wasn't necessarily far fetched. It seemed like a natural transition, especially coming from a Palisades high school. And I had quite a few friends who actually migrated from their high schools in California, whether that be Bay Area or Southern California, that ended up at Morehouse as well. And we're still friends to this day. And it is probably one of the best decisions I ever made. And it gave me a sense of self. I was surrounded by, like you said, educationally, minded individuals. I was in classroom settings where the professors cared about my well-being. And not only did I get a great education, but I got a chance to immerse myself in the heritage of what it meant to be a member of an HBCU environment. And I mean, the list goes long from Spike Lee to Martin Luther King Jr., right? Samuel L. Jackson. I could probably go on and on. But this is where I got a chance to appreciate those things directly as opposed to vicariously. And again, I wouldn't change one step of the process.
And during that time, I've done a couple of interviews with folks who've gone to HBCUs and the why and what were some of the motivations. One of the things that did stick out to me, and I would love to see if this at all influenced you, Debbie Allen winds up doing A Different World,
Mm-hmm.
really shining a light on, first of all, just shined a light on going to college. And there's been plenty of studies that have shown that show actually did help increase college enrollment for African Americans. You came from a family and a legacy, so obviously I feel like you, like me, I wasn't first generation by any means. I just knew I was going to go to college. My dad had gone to Howard Law. I saw it. So I feel like it was ingrained, but it was even, I feel like, more of a sweetener when I saw a show like that because I saw
Yeah.
myself that I could be in like an environment like that. Did that any of that weigh in for you?
100%. By the time A Different World was airing, I was on the other side of college, but it was a validator, right? That, wow, they were actually reflecting the world as I lived it when I was in school. And to sit and watch that, I guess it was Thursday nights, it was like a
Yes.
viewing. We were going to sit down and we're going to enjoy this show. And to see the characters develop and the exchanges that were happening, it was, again, looking at yourself in a sense from the time that I was there, right? When I was in that environment. And it was very true to form in a lot of ways. Of course, it was television, but it still was a positive reflection, an idea that this is what is possible. And again, it gave me a sense to validate that, yes, I actually just explored what is possible.
At this point in your life, help us understand like what you're thinking about doing with life because from there to what you're doing at Google is completely a different, kind of life. So I'm wondering what were you thinking at that time that you wanted to do? And then I guess also the song you picked is Fight the Power by Public Enemy. And
Mhm.
I'd like to know why you picked that song. On a previous episode, someone picked from a generation before they picked James Brown's I'm Black and I'm Proud. So I
Mhm.
feel like there's probably some synergies as to, and this person also was Debbie Allen. She went to an HBCU and she said going to Howard made her really love that song. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering if there are any parallels there.
I would say definitely a parallel because this is where I finally understood sense of self, right? A lot of things we learned in and out of the classroom was about the system and whether or not that system is truly a propellant for Black success. It became quickly clear to me in Atlanta, there's still Georgia, right? And during that time frame, this is when Jesse Jackson was going to run for president, and we had different types of marches and rallies, and those types of things. And this is when you started to realize we are going to fight the power. I mean, literally and figuratively going up against a system that isn't necessarily geared to be a catalyst for success. Sitting in an environment in Atlanta, specifically in the Atlanta University Center, because not only was Morehouse, there's Spelman right across the street. There's Clark Atlanta University right across the street from there. At the time, there was Morris Brown, and then the graduate program at Atlanta University itself. So this consortium of progressively minded young Black students really gave me a sense of self, because I saw myself in the classroom, outside of the classroom, and this idea that there is a power out there that you have to rail against if you're going to be successful. And that is the soundtrack. That just makes sense for me.
You know, as you were talking, it made me think about Atlanta back in those days. And it was a very powerful time to be, you know, a college student there. I think all of just when I think about so many of the community leaders that you got to interact with on a daily basis who were still alive. Like, I think just amazing. But also, y'all have fun. And let me tell you where I'm going with this, because I did start visiting Atlanta, you know, later in my college and law school career. And eventually, you guys have this picnic. And for my listener, it was called, y'all, Freaknik. But it started as a college picnic for, my understanding is for people, college students at Morehouse and Spelman and Clark Atlanta, like the schools you mentioned, to get together and convene. And college students from different, like you had the DC group of students that convened and like the what. So it was a way for you guys to all just fellowship with each other. It was really kind of an innocent picnic. And it's what I'm understanding, that by the time I start going in the 90s has evolved into something. I mean, there's a documentary about it, a little more chaotic. Is that a nice way to say it?
That's a really nice way to put it. I mean, what everybody knows as Freaknik started off actually as it was DC, Maryland, Virginia, DMV. They used to actually host this at a place called White Park, which is not too far away from the Atlanta University Center. And it was a small gathering with a boombox, some barbecue, and just a few folks just having a good time. And it just grew. It took on a whole attitude. And it actually ended up growing to take over the city of Atlanta, right? And I don't think anybody would have forecasted that would be the case, but that's the draw of, and I think a real-time example of what an HBCU experience can look like on steroids, right? Some bad stuff, of course, but a lot of good, right? You know, whether it be step shows, mini concerts, different activations going on around the city. But it did become a bit unwieldy in the latter years. I used to actually travel back from LA to Atlanta for Freaknik for a period of time before they shut it down. And I think it's actually trying to kind of reinvent itself here much later in life. But yeah, it was actually a metamorphic experience from a small crew of people just hanging out in a park to something that literally took over the city of Atlanta.
And for my listeners, I mean, when he says take over the city, like I remember going to a Freaknik, and it may have been 92, 93, some early 90s, where like literally, if you think about a major city with major highways and streets, the streets were clogged. The highway was stopped. Like it was a major 85, 75 was stopped. Peachtree was stopped. Like it was a major accident or catastrophe in the city where you literally got out of your car because there was traffic was going nowhere, and people were dancing on the top of their cars and walking around on the highway with their boom boxes and music and stopping in cars and telling you, oh, hey, you're cute. Can I have your phone number? Like just a scene out of like something so unimaginable. And in many respects, if something had happened that like if you had a medical emergency or something like that, it would have been bad luck because nobody could get to you. It literally crippled the city by the time it got that big.
Yeah, for real.
What? Like just crazy.
I mean, fortunately, there were, major incidents. Of course, there's always skirmishes. There's always stuff, but it started off as harmless fun. The harmless fun got big, and some things got a little, right and left of center, as one would expect. But it was something to behold. It's quite an experience, huh?
Man, did I have fun. Let's just
Yeah,
be very
exactly.
clear.
Right.
The young adult Shannon had the time of her life. And I actually met some people. We didn't have Facebook, we didn't have
Yeah.
Google, we didn't have any of those things. So I actually met people from all over the country being stopped like that and getting out of your car. I have connections to this day of people that I just randomly met at Freaknik walking, or I was parked next to them on the highway,
Exactly.
that are my friends, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it was an amazing time to be alive and witness that. But listen,
Yeah.
listeners, you can go. There's a whole documentary on this on one of the streaming platforms. You can go watch it if you don't know what we're talking about. DB and the school he went to, they were the beginners of really what I would call an amazing gathering, especially for folks who were in college and just having that desire to be connected with like-minded people.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, there's a learning experience in there. Yes, there's coursework, there's, the class, right? But one of the things that even young people today talk about is learning to hustle, understanding how to navigate as a young adult extends beyond what you learn in a classroom. You got to figure out how to get things done. Mind you, a lot of us who migrated to Atlanta from California, we're 3,000 miles away from home, trying to figure it out, right? When and how to eat, how to get a free meal from the cafeteria when the bank account ran low, all that kind of stuff. And then the music scene was on tilt, right? I mean, that's when you had Bad Boy South. That's when we talked about the regional nature of music. These things started to just explode during that 80s, 90s time frame. It was very different. This is where everything started to just get bigger, more vibrant, and had scale to it. So what was going on in Atlanta, people were interested in California. I exported music back to LA. A lot of us did, as much as we imported what we were listening to in LA. So that exchange was happening. And obviously it's much different today. But again, there was no Spotify and Apple Music and all the things that we have today. Music was learned and experienced, one, by radio stations and by DJs. And for students who were matriculating back and forth, and I remember going up to DC for homecomings at Howard. And that's when I got hip to go-go. And I had a lot of friends that were from DC that are frat brothers of mine to this day. And they were used to bring in just little small cassette mixtapes and they would play go-go music. And I'm like, what is this? And I've never heard it on a radio anywhere because it was regional in nature. You didn't hear that on K-Day or KGFJ or whatever our stations were back then. The only way you experienced it is because you were exposed to it because somebody brought it to you. And it's just a fascinating time
Right.
that some people maybe don't remember, but I do vividly.
Yeah, I mean, again, music was just so regional. In LA, you guys kind of had your gangster rap. There's a certain sound from LA music from that time. Like when I hear it, I'm like, oh, that's an LA song. Just like in DC, we had the drums from the go-go bands, from you'd have the kids outside of our subway station just going "Ba-doop, ba-doop, ba-doop, ba-doop," boom. The South had this
Yeah.
the dirty, what do they call the dirty South,
The
right?
dirty
They had
South.
that this whole sound. New York had Biggie and its sound, and it was just Miami had Luke and that
Yeah.
fast dun dun
House music in
house
Chicago.
music in Chicago, in the Midwest. And when you met people, you started really importing their music into and that's how we exchanged music back then. What
Mhm.
a time, right? What a
What
time
time?
to be alive. Because like I said, my kids now are they can just go on Spotify and hear music from everywhere. And so it's different. I'm glad we've evolved in a certain way, but I also, there's a nostalgic, to me, that's do miss some of that regional, just,
Yeah, this idea of discovery. You don't know, I mean, discovery is very different now, for sure.
it's very different. So, okay, you make it through Morehouse and you start your early career. So tell us what your early career is. But the song that you pick, I love this song. All the way up. Nothing can stop me. I'm all the way up. Fat Joe, Remy Ma, French Montana. That
Mhm.
is the song that you pick.
Yeah, I picked the song not because it was of that era when I came out of college, but it is retrospectively, that's how I felt. This is the time, right? I'm going up and to the right when I think about my career, my contribution. I'm a college graduate, moving through my MBA, all those things. And, interestingly, when I replay my career, I think about it in three distinct chapters. And that is, I started as a finance person. I had aspirations to be a CFO, actually. I know that's your sweet spot. So I started off in accounting and did FP&A work and strat ops and all those types of things. And there was an evening, quite frankly, when I was signing commission checks. I was at a company called Nextel at the time. And it was one of those situations, kind of surreal, where no light is on other than in my office, right? And I'm signing these really nice commission checks. And I thought to myself, I wonder if the people that are receiving these checks are actually out working right now. And the answer in my mind was obviously no. So I finished up work. I took a weekend and I decided over the weekend that I want to do that. I was motivated by the opportunity to make money, of course, because the commission and all those types of things. But I also thought about it in the context of when you're in the FPA track or the accounting track, you're a scorekeeper, right? That is, you're reporting on the performance of or projecting the performance of. And I decided I wanted to be the person that is putting points on the board. I wanted to be scoring. And the translation for me was carry the bag, go out and sell, test my ability to determine my income based on how well I could actually close business for the business. And I made the transition, hard pivot from finance track to now I'm a salesperson. And, during that time frame, again, keeping in mind this concept of all the way up, I just saw opportunities, right? I'm starting a family now. I'm managing my own agenda and time. I'm out there, I'm closing business. I moved from direct sales to manager, eventually went into corporate account sales. Now I'm actually negotiating corporate account deals with national accounts like Coca-Cola and Prudential and State Farm and things like that. So incredible opportunity. It afforded me all of the things that I thought I needed and wanted at that time. I think I still had a hunger though. Again, coming out of undergrad, dual degree finance and marketing, what I had not done is practiced the theory or the practice of marketing. And at the time of Nextel, I'm still doing sales stuff at the time. Nextel went into this joint venture with a company called Boost Mobile. Boost was a prepaid wireless company out of Australia. Prepaid wireless in the States really didn't exist. I looked at that and I saw what they were doing around, things like skate and snowboarding and surfing and all these types of things. And I thought to myself, well, that's pretty West Coast in nature at this time. If this brand, if this business really wants to make an imprint with youth nationally, we have to have a way in that is relevant nationally. So I actually wrote a business plan and I sent it to a guy who is my mentor to this day, a guy named Daryl Butler. I love him dearly. He's a trusted friend, confidant, mentor. He was a CMO at Boost at the time. And I convinced him that you need to be more relevant than just skate, snow, surf. You need to be relevant in street basketball, in fashion, in music, right? And this is where the light came on for me when you think about a brand embedding itself in culture with purpose. This is not new. I didn't just architect that thinking here in 2026. This is something that I didn't necessarily know how to codify clearly, but it's what I understood. And that unlocked this idea of being a marketer. And then that marketing was, how do you storytell when you're not endemic to a space? We're a prepaid wireless company, but we are doing things with And One Mixtape Tour, which at the time was just, incredible with Escalade and Hot Sauce and Professor and all those guys, right?
And for my listeners, that was a huge basketball, kind of like street basketball,
Yep.
but like some people who never were in the NBA, but the skills they had was just like
100%.
yeah, I remember that.
So we looked at it and said, what can Boost do around the culture of basketball? Culture being one of the operative words, second word being basketball. And that unlocked music again, and fashion again, and all the things that everybody does right now around the NBA with the tunnel walks and the music and all that kind of stuff. We were doing this circa 2004. And what it reinforces for me is that I was on the right track then. I'm still on the right track today. So over the course of that time, from Boost to then Nike, obviously an incredible brand, a hallmark in marketing, but also a hallmark brand when it comes to technology, footwear, and sport. Who better to learn from than the swoosh? And I ended up actually moving from the swoosh to working with the Jordan brand globally. Again, all the way up, right? Now I'm sitting in rooms with Michael Jordan, making decisions about assortments that we were going to bring to market, going around the world, finding out how to insert the brand in a meaningful way when it comes to performance. Because remember, this is about the time when retro started to take off. Everybody was more enamored with the shoes that he played in than the technology that Jordan was bringing to the market real time. So one of my big challenges was to go around the world and figure out how to reinforce the performance nature. I could have a whole talk about that at some point in time. Point being, what I was really doing is reinforcing what I had learned when I made the transition into Boost, back in the early 2000s, and something that was kind of just the circuitry was already there for me as a young person. I just had this understanding. Why do brands get invitations into people's lives? Is because they show themselves as relevant in people's lives in a meaningful way. And that's through the lens of music. We've talked about that. It's through the lens of fashion and sport and art, and you can go on and on. And to this day, that is one of the things that I try to insert into any of the brands that I've worked with over the course of my career is, if you really want to be purposeful in somebody's lives, you have to be contextual in their life. Contextual in their life means, do you know what they love? And can your presence help them explore the thing that they love more, deeper, with more intention? When any brand can answer that question, it's probably going to earn that invitation into that person's life.
There's so many lessons there. Oh my goodness. Then, like you said, what a great song, because this is an explosive period for you.
Absolutely.
Right? An explosive period of growth. But you make a major pivot. So one of my first questions is, in my opinion, I'm biased. I think you got that great training in strategy and FP&A. I think that actually really does help you when you make this pivot and you're carrying the bag, and then you're going into rooms and you're trying to convince these brands that this is the way that you're trying to steer them in marketing. I think having that solid background and understanding the economics of the business, which is what you get when you're working in a finance and an FP&A type of role, I think that helped you. Am I right?
100%. That was one of my value props as a salesperson, was to understand the economics of the deal, right? Because a lot of decisions are made when you're selling, not necessarily on the product truth. Of course, that's important. The product has to deliver on a promise, but it also has to make financial sense. And one of the things I could bring to the table was not only understanding the value proposition of a product solving a problem or helping a company seize an opportunity, but I could also speak to it through the lens of the fiscal benefit for the person buying, as well as for the business that I was representing. Incredible superpower.
What do they say? If it don't make dollars, it don't make sense.
It don't make sense.
Right? Right. And so also I'd love to understand. So I think that's a great foundational thing that you had and became a superpower for you when you were in those rooms. What I'd love to understand, and several leaders have talked about this, myself included, when you make those pivots, for some people in your circle, it may seem like you are taking a step backwards from where your career and your boxed career, if you will, was supposed to be going. Help us understand, when you decided to make that change, how did you make the change? How did you convince somebody to let you leave one team and go into sales and marketing? And, were people supportive? Did you have any naysayers at the time?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I have always tried to find myself surrounded by what I call angels. These are people who truly believe in me, right? Whether that be through functional excellence or just great voices who can speak to me honestly, keep it real, if you will, but also say to me, Daryl Cobbett, I'm going to stay with him for a second. Again, no formal marketing experience at this point, right? So not classically trained other than the theoretical work that I did in college. And I send this business plan to him about how to expand, talking about embedding the brand and culture and all those types of things. He says, "This is really interesting. Why do you think you can do it?" And my answer was because I live it. I have a lived experience. I've been at the park, at Venice, at 4th Street, at Rucker. I've spent time in the streets, if you will, at the clubs. And I understand the music that people are actually playing in their cars is the music that they're listening to in the clubs, and the sneakers are on their feet, all that kind of stuff. And he was one of the people who said, "All right, I'm going to give you a shot." And I started off doing event marketing, what we call experiential marketing today. And we did some phenomenal things at Boost, which actually led to a lot of the things that I've done post my career at Boost. But it's because, to your point, Shannon, he was somebody who was willing to give me a shot. Now, I had to earn the right to stay at that table, which means I had to deliver on what I said I could deliver. And I think I did so, right? I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if I didn't. But you need people who are going to keep it real with you, but are also the ones that are going to give you the shot, right? And they're going to be the person that is going to coach you, that are going to inspire you, that are going to course correct for you at different stages in your career. And that's not just as a young dude coming up. To this day, at this late stage in my career, I still have folks that I look to for counsel. All right, I'm at this crossroads. I'm at this fork in the road. What do you think? I'm trying to establish my leadership identity. What do you think? I'm running into this challenge. How should I think about it? Because you won't necessarily have all the answers, but there are people around you, if you've surrounded yourself with the right network, who have the ability to pour into you advice objectively, but with love, that can help shape the trajectory of whether it be your career or your personal life, right? And I lean on that. So yes, I've had the fortune of having the right people around me who can provide me with that counsel. I think the old statement is, a journey well traveled is one with worthy counsel. And I kind of live by that.
That's right. You are yet another leader that I've had the fortune of speaking to who really subscribes to the personal board of directors.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah,
Way
yeah,
of leadership. I certainly have a personal board of directors of folks that I call upon. And none of us would be where we are, and none of us can go to where we want to go without them.
100%.
Just, you're not going to get there alone.
No.
So what an incredible journey you are having at this phase. Like you said, you're sitting in rooms with like Michael Jordan, and people are listening to you and your ideas, and you're seeing them come to life. You're having an incredible time in your life. But then I like to say life starts lifing, because we all have life events and life lights and pivotal moments. And I like how you said, as we were preparing for this, how you think about success without grounding is just not really a thing, right?
Mhm.
And so what you pick is No Greater Love by Smokey Norfolk. So take us through, the season that you had to go through in your life as everything was going up. What winds up happening?
Yeah. So on the surface, everything was absolutely extraordinary, career-wise, all that kind of thing. In the backdrop, right? I was living in Los Angeles. I was commuting to Portland for the job with Jordan. At the same time, my kids are now in high school. My daughter's playing volleyball. My son is playing basketball. So I'm missing an essential part of what I'm working for, and that is the family, right? Because I'm gone 3, if not 4 days out of the week, sometimes for an extended period of time, depending on travel. So I'm missing being a parent, right? I'm missing being an integral part of a family unit. As Nirvana-like as my job was, it came at an extraordinary cost. And there was a time when I had to make a tough decision. This was my life's work. And if you think about somebody who's a sneakerhead, who loves basketball, who loves sport, who loves culture, I am doing it at maybe not the highest level, but in one of the pinnacle environments, that being the Jordan brand, I had to say no, because that mean that I wanted to make the family a priority. And along the way, I hadn't, and it cost me dearly, and it meant a whole reset. And this is where I had to learn that all the stuff that I thought I was solely responsible for, like you said, that personal board of directors, it became very apparent to me that if I was the only person responsible for it, I wouldn't be in this dark period because no one would craft a journey with a dark period intentionally. This is where I learned that there's a greater force, and my relationship with God and my spiritual walk became very clear to me at this stage because I realized that what I'm learning now, it wasn't just my doing. It was coming from somewhere else. And this is where I had to reset. And this is where I understand that there's no greater love. If you have to go back and read those lyrics or listen to the song carefully, it really was a soundtrack for a period that was pretty significant for me. And I have such an appreciation for having hit that tough period because I don't have the success I have today were it not for the learning that came from that period back then.
Right. I mean, often, and I certainly feel it's happened in my career, but several of the leaders have said often you wind up having to take those at the time 2, 3, whatever steps backwards. And when it's happening, you're like, why is this happening? I've done everything right. I've done what I've been asked. Why am I going backwards? And you actually need to take those steps to propel yourself 5 steps forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But at the time you're going through it, it's hard because it's hard to see.
Unbelievably hard. But it is the most enlivening lesson learned. Again, definitely postscript. We could probably have a whole nother conversation about that in and of itself. But this idea that your foundation sometimes has to get reset. And in the resetting of that foundation, you add to that foundation appreciations for things that you maybe didn't have in the previous foundation. Because everything is foundational, right? There's a starting point, but you hit another point, that becomes your new foundation. You hit another point, that becomes a new foundation. And sometimes as it does progress, there is a walk back. And it's like, okay, we're going to reset this thing because there's some things that need to be learned in order to fortify this foundation for what is your next phase of growth, personally, professionally, or otherwise. I have a CMO, Lorraine Toohill, who also often talks about a career is not a ladder as much as we used to think about it that way. It's more like a jungle gym. You're climbing over here, you're sliding over here, you're swinging over here. You're doing a bunch of stuff, the right things, and I don't mean stuff in a bad way, but you're doing things that are progressive in nature, but they're not linear. And those who actually have aspired to and have achieved a modicum of success have probably retrospectively played on that jungle gym because there are a number of different things to learn. I can say the same thing. What I know about marketing, finance, and sales is because I actually lived in marketing, finance, and sales as part of my career, not necessarily because somebody told it to me, is because I actually did it. Jungle gym.
I love that. I'm going to have to borrow that one. That's a good one. Because that's exactly right. I've heard other people say it zigs and zags. Like it's not a straight line. It zigs and zags, goes down, it goes off a cliff, it comes back on. It's kind of almost like a video game, right? You have another life. You go over the cliff, but somehow you have another life to like actually drive that road again. That has really been the recipe for so many successful leaders and their pathway to success. Look, like you said, looking back on it, it humbled you and it propels you because we'll talk about your next stage. But during the time that's happening, it is very difficult. What helped you get through? I happen to personally believe in the concept, and I know that this is something that's in the Bible, but people also talk about in poetry, et cetera, about steps being ordered. So I happen to just believe that sometimes even when we think we know best about where we should be, because your steps are ordered, and because of just that higher belief and power that I believe in, this is supposed to happen because that's not the step I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
The step I was supposed to do is over here. And I just need to actually humble myself and follow it.
Absolutely. Our steps are ordered. And you don't appreciate it until you can't control your outcome. When the outcome is presented without your consult, you realize how little control you have, relatively speaking. And that is a great lesson to learn and appreciate. And what now shapes me in my beliefs and the way that I navigate is appreciating that there's a path for me. My job is to do the things worthy of seeing what the next step is supposed to be. And that requires prayer, that requires meditation, that requires making the right choices, asking for the illumination at different points in time when it's not clear. That kind of goes back to what I said earlier. When you have worthy counsel, someone can actually illuminate what might be the next step in order for you to figure out the second step. I talk to young people all the time about think two, take one, right? And life's order should be where you're not just looking right in front of you, you're actually looking ahead. If you think about an analogy, a simple one, a runner. If you're a runner, you're not watching every one of your strides. You're looking out in front, right? And the strides are a function of you identifying what's out in front of you. And to the extent possible, you have someone who's going to tell you, park bench, crack in the road, both of which you need to figure out how to navigate. But the park bench, you're going to see it. You can navigate those types of things. The cracks in the road, that's where somebody is the counsel. That's going to tell you your step is going to be interesting if you don't pay attention to this crack. And that is how I think about my career. That's how I think about my life. Who is there for me who can actually identify the small things that I need to be aware of? Step one, that affords me the opportunity to achieve the big things. Step number two, think two, take one.
I love that. And so you do get through this period. Like most things in life, this too shall pass. And you get through this period. And this brings us kind of where we are with you today. The song that you pick is Won't He Do It by Karen Hawthorne. I'd love to understand, how do you get to Google? Talk a little bit more about why that song and just kind of what are you doing today?
Yeah. Won't he do it? Yeah. He said he would. I think if you replay any of what I've just talked about, it all is kind of getting to the culmination of every one of these exercises in a meaningful way. And that is, I'm at Beats by Dre. I'm doing phenomenal work there and having a good time. I decide I want to test what I've learned in a space that doesn't necessarily have the same cultural acuity as a Beats or a Nike. And not in a bad way. It's HP. HP calls and says, we want to learn how to do this. And we want you to be the person that helps us understand how to invite ourselves into these people's lives. Now, you're talking about a tech forward brand, a household name in a lot of ways. Everybody knows who HP is and what it is, but not through the lens of culture, right? Through the lens of the operational expertise that it identifies itself through its products, laptops, printers, and the like. So adding a sprinkle of cultural resonance was something that I could bring into the organization, and did that for a few years. And then Google calls. Now, I'm not necessarily a tech dude. That's not necessarily where I've put points on the board per se, other than the time that I was at HP. But what Google has is an appetite for, an interest in, and a willingness to explore. What does it mean when you think about something as big as Google is, but it's made up of a few things. Like I said, the ecosystem, having lived it firsthand. It's quite a diverse mix of companies. You have cloud, which is B2B. You have Pixel, which is this upstart first-party hardware smartphone going up against Samsung and Apple. You've got YouTube, which is an entertainment vehicle going toe-to-toe with all the other social media networks out there. You've got all of the search products, and everybody knows Gmail and Maps and Photos and all those things that everybody uses to this day. And then you have the behemoth, the thing that actually pays the bills, our ad stack. Everybody advertises through Google, right? That is how the organization made a name for itself. But I just named 5 or 6 businesses that are businesses on their own, in their own right. Now, stepping into an organization like Google, trying to understand, that takes a little while. But then you start to understand there's an opportunity to find all of the doors and windows that Google can stand in front of when you think about the consumer in the household, right? The consumer is not a monolith. We're just as multi-hyphenate as the brand that is Google, as is the world around us. So the opportunity coming in was to present my experience when it comes to brand building, but do it in a way that has the cultural resonance and relevance that Google aspires to. We're a utility, we're thought of as a utility, but now we can be thought of as a thought leader, a thought partner, someone who helps actually get that consumer or that person closer to the thing that they're passionate about. How do you do that? Culture. Now, culture is not one thing. It's a lot of things. It's brands, it's spaces, it's social networks. It's a number of different things, and they're all different for all of us. But our job and my job was to identify what are the things that make the most sense, because now we can say we can actually get this person closer to their passion because we have a product that can be of service in some meaningful way. Embed the brand and culture with purpose. And that's what I've had the opportunity to do over the course of the last, call it 4, almost 5 years.
But it's a combination of all the things and all the experiences that you have had across
Yes.
maybe different industries, but it's still rooted in how you started with culture and storytelling and really understanding what economically works, what works from the consumer, what works for the company. It literally brings all of these things together
Yeah.
in one massively scaled way.
Yeah. So if you think about this song, Won't He Do It? I never could have imagined that early on. I maybe had, delusions of grandeur. Like someday I'm going to be this triple threat leader in an organization, but having it come full circle and be fully manifested, I don't know what you want to call it, just a perfect confluence of events and opportunities that have led to this moment. And it ain't just my doing. It's,
Right.
this is God's work.
And that's how it happens for so many people in the sense of, and I tell young people this all the time. We both, have young adults in our lives that we have raised and we mentor both our kids and our chosen kids, if you will.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
what I tell them is that all of these experiences, I wish I could say that everything that I did in my past, the pathway I knew I was going to wind up being the CFO of a tech company. I wish I
Right,
could tell you that. When I was in law school, I knew that's where this was going to go. I wish I could
right,
tell you that I knew I was going to make films and produce them. I wish I could tell you that I knew I would have this podcast. None of
right.
that was a plan, but all of the experiences that have to happen earlier in your life come together and help you actually forge a pathway that is uniquely you. A good friend of mine likes to say, in the beginning of our lives and our careers, and maybe even to a certain extent, as the higher we get up in companies, we are always comparing ourselves to a standard of where we think we're supposed to be. Some of it is self imposed, some of it is other people in your life or in
Yeah.
your ear. But really, I think at this age, you're running your own race.
Hmm. Yeah,
It's
definitely.
uniquely your race.
Exactly. Yeah. There's something liberating in that in of itself, Shannon. This idea that now I am not driven by what I see to my right and to my left. I'm driven by my purpose. And at this stage, as much as I still got work to do, day in and day out to support the brand's objectives, I'm thinking about, am I actually making an impact? Am I influencing others? Am I being of service in a meaningful way? Right. For all that I have learned, whether that be through trial and error or because I had that worthy counsel, my job now is to do the same thing. Not only do I have a responsibility to drive a business objective and an impact for the company, but I see that equally as important. I have a job to do when it comes to young people who have aspirations, who need that angel who can share with them an insight, a thought, a belief, a behavior that they won't read in a book, and then it will come from the heart. So as much as what I do every day is important, I spend just as much time at, lunch and learns. I get invited in to mentor young people. We have an APMM program, Associate Product Manager, Marketing Manager program. We have these incredible internship programs. And I make a point of being present when they ask me to be. If I can be in a room providing thoughts and ideas, not directional. I don't do right, left turns, right? I help young people identify destinations. And then we can talk about the tools and things you need to navigate appropriately, going back to that jungle gym concept in career, but that applies in life as well. So I'm at that stage now. It's a really, really fun place to be. And that
I
is,
love it.
I can do what I love. That is the practice of marketing, but I can do what I love. That is the practice of giving back.
It's the combination of all of those things that you've worked so hard for to have a life. It's a balanced life. It's a life well lived. Th- Nothing is perfect by no means. Like you said, it
No.
was a jungle gym, but you are literally at the point of like, you know, this is where you were meant to be. And another concept that somebody shared with me recently, that when they look back in their life, one of the things they wanted to make sure that they could say is that they didn't just take up space. You
Right,
didn't
right.
you made a difference, and you certainly have done that. And so listen, we could literally talk to you all day, especially all of the experiences you've had in culture and music and all these brands and what you're doing. But at this part of the show, I love to ask my guests, what is that one song that just makes you happy? That if I played it right now, you would just get a big smile on your face because it just really warms your heart to hear it.
I mentioned to you, I came out of sales and went into a whole new world called marketing. And it was an eye-opening experience. I might be telling more than I'm supposed to, but we had a lot of fun in my early days as a marketer. I mentioned, tooling around the country with the And1 mixtape team and doing stuff in music, as Boost was trying to establish itself. Well, that meant being in the scene, the club scene. South Beach, Miami, circa 2004 or 5 or something like that. You got Ocean Prime and Opium and all these great clubs. There was one called Bed, and it was literally a club full of beds. And that was how you got bottle service and all this other type of stuff. It was quite an experience, something to behold. And at the time, the anthem, in my opinion, was Fat Joe, Lean Back.
Lean back.
Lean
That
back.
song, lean back. Lean
Lean
back.
back. And I mean, you could put that song on to this day, and it takes me back to a Saturday night at Bed in Miami when I was doing event marketing. Again, probably a little bit left or right of center in terms of what I was supposed to be doing, but it was part of the experience, right? And it represents a bit of a catalyzing moment if I were to try to professionalize my behavior, where you had an appreciation for where the mashup happens, right? What I had an appreciation for from the street allowed me to straddle the fence today. So I keep a foot in the street and a foot in the boardroom because I have an appreciation for how important both are, right? Again, that's my way of post-rationalizing my behavior, but lean back it is.
Hey, I love that song. It's a happy song. You play it and people actually do a little lean back. And so I completely
Yeah.
get that. But what a time, like you said, for you to be learning that firsthand and then how much that has played in that intersection of just really understanding both what's going on, like I said, in Wall Street and what's going on, literally on like, what is it, Ocean Avenue, if
Ocean
you
Avenue.
will, in
Yeah, yeah,
Miami
yeah.
at the same time and being able to play in that intersection has really helped you be so successful in your career. And look, we're
Yeah.
here for all the branding stuff, all the partnerships. We are cheering you on that you are working on today. So, how can we find you? How can we support what you're working on? Let us
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I mean, we continue to look for ways to diversify this idea of being in culture with purpose. What I look for now are ideas that are not necessarily rooted in sport. And that's not because we don't love that, because we spent a lot of time establishing ourselves in sport. You mentioned a few of them early on, whether that be the NBA, NWSL, McLaren and race and Olympics and the like. We have an opportunity to plant flags in other places that are culturally relevant as well. When we think about music and fashion, art, travel, food, I mean, the list goes on. The other thing that I'm really looking to do is balance the portfolio of talent that represents our brand. We've got Giannis and Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry. Yep. We've got Lando from the Formula One team. I mean, we just signed Alex Cooper, which was great. But I think there's an opportunity for us to diversify further. Women are doing so much in shaping culture. We have an opportunity to make sure that voice is heard as well. When you think about the tools that we have, the innovation that we have, and the inspiration and heart that comes from women who actually drive a lot of these initiatives in meaningful ways, right? So the ability to continue to broaden our portfolio, both beyond sport, but also that we're not so male heavy when we think about the stories that we want to tell, the role that tech plays in people's lives in a unique and diverse way. Those all represent opportunities. So as successful as Google is as an entity, these are the things that we're looking at that will continue to create those new foundations I talked about earlier, right? New places and new spaces to storytell, to engage, and to demonstrate the role of tech and what role it plays in people's lives.
I love it. Well, listen, Daryl, how can my listeners stay in touch with what you're working on and follow you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I try to tap in as frequently as possible. That's probably the primary one when we're thinking about business or talking about networking or trying to find ways to intersect. So LinkedIn is it. Daryl Butler. Let's build.
We'll put that in the show notes so that people can find you easily. But listen, DB, it has been so much fun getting to learn more about your journey. Your playlist is fire. I love it.
Thank you.
And just really being inspired by the jungle gym that has turned into a really successful career. So before we get out of here, I want to wrap up your songs for your playlist. First up, you picked Keep Your Head to the Sky, Earth, Wind, and Fire. Next, we have Fight the Power. After that, we have All the Way Up. Next song we have is No Greater Love. And the final song that we picked was Won't He Do It? With the bonus song, Lean Back.
That's the bonus. Yes.
The DB playlist for a career and a life well lived. DB, thank you so much for joining No Boxes Just Verses.
It's been so good. I am literally got goosebumps. The conversation has been great. Thank you for having me, Shannon. I mean, this platform is absolutely incredible. It's not your typical everyday experience. The types of conversations like this are just as cathartic for me as it is, hopefully, for those who get a chance to listen.
Well, thank you. They're definitely cathartic for me. So I really appreciate you. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to No Boxes, Just Verses. And if this episode moved y'all, please share it, rate us, follow the show on your favorite platform, and we can keep building our leadership playlists together. So you can find me, guys, on Instagram as Shannon Nash 1 and No Boxes Just Verses on Instagram. You can also find me on LinkedIn as Shannon Nash ESQ CPA. You can also find No Boxes Just Verses on LinkedIn. You can visit our website at noboxesjustverses.com. Finally, don't forget to check out the show notes. The show notes are super important because this is where the playlists will live. You will be able to get these playlists on Apple and Spotify. You'll also be able to follow up and see how to reach out to the guests, follow them, and support them. Until next time, I need you to stay unboxed. You come for the stories, but you stay for the playlists. I'm Shannon Nash, and I'm out.
No boxes, just verses. Listen to the sound. No boxes, just verses. We not playing around. No boxes, just verses. Every voice reverse. No boxes, just verses. Units just rehearse. No. This is Shannon Nash and I got cloud. This is Shannon Nash, the show's about. No boxes, just verses. The songs we used to play. No boxes, just verses. How we found our way. No boxes, just verses. Leading every day. No boxes, just verses. Let's all together say.